story like the back of my hand, 'cause I've heard it all before. You always say that you're the one that's in demand, and I don't know the score.
Well, death and taxes are the only certainty. Well, 20% of people of society. And I have made it on my own in this world. Well, nothing to get a turn around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna stop the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna stop the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation from the self-preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
Right. Apparently we're starting. What's been happening behind the scenes, there's been sort of very, very furious things. There's no sound that we've heard. and then we were sort of trying to establish that we'd be heard if we were talking. And so these are the joys of a live show over the internet. Welcome to the 52nd edition of Political Unmuted. And I just want to start, it was just after the last show, when I looked at the number of people who'd been engaging with us. And I always do, I always say how fantastic the team is and thank them. But wow, just how unbelievable our listeners are. Literally, because Paul's just read me a list of the countries that people are listening in. Literally from all around the world. We have listeners from all around the world. Such a long list of countries. And come in and listen to us and then listen to the podcasts after the show and watch again on YouTube. And you are just so wonderful and so loyal. And my golly, thank you so very, very much. Anyway, I'll stop wittering on now. And we'll get on with the show. And I'm introducing the team. The boss, as always, is Paul Daly. Hiya, Paul.
Hello.
And the real boss, as always, of course, is Laura Daly. Hi, Laura.
Hello.
We're missing today Stuart, who's having a week. Do we know why Stuart? He's well, isn't he? He's just
been working too hard and he's exhausted and he wants to watch the show for a change.
Oh, hi. Are you watching, Stuart? Stuart, we can't do without you. Where are you?
He might be watching the match, to be fair to him, like most people, but you know.
If you're watching the match and you're watching this on catch-up, be ashamed. Be very ashamed. And we're also missing Samantha, who's busy as well. With sort of these county councillors. It's a much busier job than you ever thought it was when you took it. But we are joined by Omid. Welcome, and so lovely. Tell us a little about yourself, Omid.
You put me on the spot now. I'm a parish councillor from East Durham, a Labour Party member for about 5 years now. I did actually stand for the county council election, but didn't get in, unfortunately. I stood in the city. So definitely politically active and obviously wanting to represent my community and the county as a whole, really. So thank you very much for having me on the show tonight.
Oh, it's wonderful. And it's always great to meet somebody new and to have their take on things. You're a member of Easington CLP.
That's right, yeah.
Do you hold any positions within the CLP?
I do, yes. I'm currently their BAME officer.
Right. Now, I've got two questions to ask you, Omid, about this. Mm-hmm. The first one is that where do you stand on this thing that we should not use the acronym BAME and that we should have some alternative?
I understand why people say the term is outdated. It's simply currently the one the Labour Party uses, so I use it. I don't have a particular problem with it myself, but I do see that it is outdated. I think a more accurate term would simply be maybe ethnic minorities. So EM officer would be more appropriate rather
and I mean, I love this. I love the way that sort of our understanding of things changes, and then we have to change our language and the way we think to take account of the way our understanding is growing and developing. But I'd like you to unpack, please, for me, why you think the term BAME, you said it's outdated. Why is it outdated?
Well, it particularly sort of refers to, it's literally short for, I think it's Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. But obviously, there are many people who have African or Caribbean ancestry, but don't identify themselves as Black, but are certainly part of an ethnic minority. There's the fastest growing ethnic minority, which are people like myself who have multiple ethnic backgrounds. I'm British and Persian. So there are plenty of people who simply don't really fit into any of those specific categories anymore. So it's better to use a more, I would say, in my opinion, it's better just to use something like, simply, like I say, something along the lines of ethnic minorities.
sort of, yes. Well, thank you very much. I was going to ask you a question about the word minorities and whether you were happy about the word minorities. I mean, I do understand it's a factually descriptive term. But anyway,
I take it quite literally myself, because it's literally just a case of simply the fact that in Britain, obviously people of white European origin are still the ethnic majority. So people like myself are of an ethnic minority. So that's basically how I see it, quite literally. I don't take any offence at all from the term minority at all. Some people might have a big difference of opinion, but
and before we move on, you sort of you feel being grilled, but you sort of this happens to everybody else, because I just get interested in things and then I can't stop. Sort of like a dog with a bone. And sort of, can you explain to me and to our listeners what you see your role as ethnic minorities BAME officer to be? How do you see your role within your CLP?
I see it very much as a sort of way of making sure that people from ethnic minorities aren't, aren't abused in any way because of their ethnic minority, really. I have dealt with a couple of issues of quite sort of backwards and casual racism in the sort of area before. So really, I see it as a sort of to stand up, really, and to sort of encourage other people who might feel that they may be treated badly because of their ethnic minority, ethnic status, to not feel bad at all about it, and basically contribute to the political debate within the Labour Party.
God bless you.
But obviously, it's I'm quite fortunate in Easington in that. We welcome everyone with open arms, frankly. As long as you want to help, then, it's brilliant. You're welcomed. And,
I agree.
I think I'm very fortunate in the fact that we don't have any arguments really in our CLP meetings. We just like to get on with stuff.
So certainly you're a very active CLP, and all strength you are. Well, you're just so welcome, Hamid, and thank you for coming in and sharing. And hopefully it won't be your last appearance on the show. I've got a number of things before we start with the moment of the week. Neil Terry would far rather watch this than 22 wealthy men kicking a bag of air around a large field. Sort of, I think sort of you're failing to understand the impact of football on the national psyche, Neil. But thank you very much for those very supportive words. And everybody else, thank you for being here. Here we go.
Cultural Diversity Officer. That could work as well.
Cultural Diversity Officer would be good. What I'm doing there, is we can't do a damn thing because we're not privy to what's going on. But we've just, I think, Paul, have we just played the jingle for moment of the week? Anyway, it's the moment of the week. So I'm going to choose Paul. What was your moment of the week?
Paul, you're muted.
Paul, are you muted?
Sorry, maybe that could be my moment of the week. I'm there. It's back. I've realised what's going on. So
seamless as ever, says Joe.
I know. I've had an absolutely awful migraine, so I'm hanging by a thread. Hence the glasses and stuff. So I don't know. But
yeah, Paul, it was very interesting stuff again.
Yeah. So this one's the Richard Madeley, Alan Partridge moment where he's done it again. So Richard Madeley, accidental Partridge, where he's been talking about Shamima Begum, who for some reason he decided to compare Shamima Begum to the Nazis and say, well, you know, the Nazis, we did the Nuremberg trials and people were hanged. But, you know, I was reflecting on this last night and we didn't go after the Hitler Youth, did we? And I think we need to reflect on... You're like, what? What are you talking about, you absolute moron? So, yeah, Richard Madeley, that's the quality of our mainstream journalism, and I'll dovetail that into GB News as well with, like, Mike Hunt and Mike Oxlong and Hugh Janus all being listener guests or whatever, sending in their little opinions and stuff and getting read out, and them all getting really angry because they're being trolled by people with very silly names. So that was quite funny as well. And yeah, there's also, Laura, were you going to do the one I talked about? We've also got a celebrity presenter, which is Dehenna Davison as well, who's now decided that she's going to pick up her media career and present political corrected, it's called. So they're nicking our name, sort of, half of it. I don't think... Yeah, it's kind of similar. It's kind of similar. So, yeah, there's my 3 moments of the week, apparently.
Thank you for those 3 moments of the week. I was very interested. So much has stemmed from political. We started political, if you remember, 2 years ago, was it? And it wasn't me. It was Owen Dickinson. And on Aycliffe Radio, and then sort of it caused a huge stir there, and then we moved on to the socialist think tank, and I think it's had a transformative effect on local politics, mainly that me and the Labour people have been shunted out by people who've appeared on the show, but the now Dehenna Davison taking it up, and I'm all for people listening more and hearing more and talking more. So well done to Dehenna for that. But thank you for those moments of the week. Laura, what's your moment of the week?
Again, like Paul, I had quite a few, but I've chosen to go with the fact that over 30 women have filed a lawsuit against the company that owns Pornhub because there are videos appearing there with them in it that without their consent. I think it just really feeds into that whole the whole Darrington narrative of misogyny and patriarchy and all of that. And, you know, these women have obviously, I guess, been in a relationship they thought was safe, and then that footage is then found its way into a public domain without their consent. And it's scary and not okay, and I'm pleased to be taken to court for it. I think there's that, but also the education around how to respect people is massively necessary.
One of the questions this week was it one of the topics for conversation was around rape, wasn't it? Am I right? Do I remember right? Sort of, or was it the previous week? And our utter failure to engage properly with that as well, and it's strange that in today's society, Laura, in fact, we seem to be getting worse at respecting women's rights and women's place, don't we?
Yeah, I think so. There was certainly there's a lot said on our Social Ties show that went out on Saturday night with the Gemini Project, and we were talking about how it's only very slightly over 1% of reported rapes and sexual assaults that actually get convicted, and that's the reported ones. Many, many, many others happen without ever being reported because the statistics are so damning that people would just rather not, because of the trauma that, you know, the investigation causes.
I mean, but are you able to make a suggestion as to why, in a society which is developing and growing and becoming more aware of so many things, in fact, our treatment of women is getting steadily worse? And this isn't sort of necessarily the treatment by ordinary ladies, by ordinary men. This is at an official legal level, that things are being allowed to happen. that should not. Was sort of, this is a failure of law to a degree. I mean, why and how? In a world where we're taking the knee in so many, for Black Lives Matter, for instance, in so many areas, is our treatment of women by the law getting worse? How and why is that happening?
I mean, I think there's an argument to be had there whether it is actually getting worse or whether women are just speaking out now. So there's
Right.
more of a recognition of what's happening, for as long as anyone can remember, decades and decades, women have been the subject of mistreatment and abuse and disempowerment, I guess, and that's like factual information. That's not just somebody's opinion. That is actually what has happened. And we're still working through that. Yes, we may have come a long way, but we've got a bloody long way to go. You look at these statistics with rape and yes, and it's not just women it happens to, but disproportionately it is women who are the victims, and gender pay gap as well, and attitudes towards women. There's just so much to unpick and work on, and you're right, our legal system has failed us massively and continues to fail us. It's not doing enough at all. And I'm saying that men don't come forward. They don't. You're right. There's a lot of work to do there as well, but women don't come forward, and that's what the Me Too movement's about. That's what Time Out's about. All of that is about trying to get women to speak up about what's happening. And it is a failing of the government. And it kind of feels like we are still living in we're definitely living in a patriarchal system, but also a misogynistic one as well, where our government feels we are less important than basically everything else except maybe refugees. It's really damning, really damning. We've got this super complaint happening at the minute about the police and stuff as well, and nothing's happening. People are shouting about this and the government are just not doing anything about it, not even listening.
Going on to discuss the police later in the show, and so we'll see what's said there. Finally, Omid, moment of the week.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose you could sort of say a bit of a dry political one, really, but a bit of a change in the way Durham County Council is running now under the sort of new administration, which everyone that I know is, quite frankly, shall we say, a bit disappointed with, to say the least. They're actually they're actually increasing the budget for councils, for their neighbourhood budget. Obviously, you'll be familiar with the whole way this works, John. I'm still learning. But what I've discovered is the shocking thing that's happening is, it's fair enough having an increase in the neighbourhood budget. That's it's great. Councillors can try and do more for their communities. But the money's getting shaved off the AAP funding,
yes,
which is part of Children and Young People's Services, as far as I understand. So it's taking money away from things that could help children and vulnerable young people throughout County Durham, and giving it to councillors to do, obviously, whatever they can do within the rules of the neighbourhood budget. So it's not a COVID recovery fund, as it's been been described as. It's just moving money around so the councillors, the new administration, can try and make themselves look good by saying, I'm putting money into this project now that I've been elected.
Yes, I mean, it's being described as corrupt, but that's basically the difference is that the AAPs spend that. If the AAPs spend that money, then the people who decide how it's spent are the local people. This is all part of the 25 million regeneration fund that was agreed.
It's reducing. Sorry, but it's kind of that's the point. It's reducing the democracy around how the government funding is being spent, because obviously it's now just down to the councillor, and whatever obviously sort of stops there are in place to stop them spending on whatever they please, really. So I'm sure they have to do it within reason to a certain extent. But yeah, it's reducing the sort of way the money's allocated democratically, really. It's not a good thing.
It's a disgrace. And you're absolutely right.
The press releases aren't covering this, though. The press releases are very sort of matter of fact of, the councils are getting more neighbourhood budget, but they're not really explaining that it's coming away from, I believe it was the towns and villages budget, over £1 million coming off there.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is shit.
The reason is that the press release, you'd be surprised. The county council has a press department. They put out the press releases. And you'd be surprised how many newspapers just print that word for word without checking it or looking into it. And yeah, you're absolutely correct. This is just councillors saying the public aren't going to spend that money. I'll spend that money on what I want. And it's towns and villages regeneration fund. And the worry is that it won't be spent on towns, villages, or regeneration, but on councillors making themselves look good. Disgraceful.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm now going to move on. Now, what's going to happen to me is that there's some music going to play. You won't hear it. And then Paul is going to tell me when I can start talking again. Let's start with...
Now it's time for the big story.
Great, and now it's time for the big story. And I'm going to start with Omid again, poor Omid. No, I'm not. I'm going to start with Laura. Please forgive me. The sort of gave you some panic then, Omid. This is the plan that we're going to make care staff have the COVID jab if they want to remain care staff. Okay, surely this is a good thing, Laura.
Well, well, yes and no. You would think so. It depends on, it's funny because I've come across more anti-vaxxers this week than I've ever come, like people who are my friends on Facebook. And I still can't quite unpick the reasons why they're anti-vaxxers, but, to each their own. I do believe everyone should be vaccinated. But that aside, the government are making it, they're talking about making it compulsory for care home staff to get the jab or find another job, basically. They've got 16 weeks to get the vaccination or to leave their job. I think that in itself is quite a difficult position to offer somebody. It's an ultimatum at the end of the day. The government are saying that it's the right thing to do to protect care home staff. Now, you might say that is obvious and that is a good thing, and yes, we should be, but I just feel like I'm a bit skeptical about this because where was the government's care for these patients in the early days when they discharged positive COVID patients into care homes across the country and they really couldn't care less? This to me feels less like care for the public and more like a way to erase history. No, we never did that. As we've seen a lot from the government over the past year and a half, they do one thing and then completely deny it. There's issues. I think the trade unions will have a field day with this one. You can't make something compulsory like that. That is such a personal thing, like having something physically put into your body. You have to do that or you lose your job. So there are arguments around this that are set aside from whether you should have the vaccine or not. I believe you should. I've had my first one. I'm really looking forward to my second one. All my family have. All the Microsoft people and the Facebook people know where I am all the time now because I've got my tracker implanted. So but yeah, there's a lot of issues with this. That don't, and you don't even have to start talking about whether or not you should be getting a vaccine. It's the way they've done it. I think that is a huge problem here. So yeah, we'll see. I certainly wouldn't want to be in that position of being told to do something. I struggle with the government telling me to do things on the best of days. But also, if you look at the way our whole system is at the minute and how care workers are some of the lowest paid people who do some of the most important jobs, putting them in that position and saying, well, do this or you're not going to have a job, that's not really giving them an option either way, is it? Because what are they going to do? They need money. And you're not just going to walk out of a care home role and go into another one that's not going to worry about the vaccinations if the government are rolling this out up and down the country. So I think, yeah, I'll be interested to see how the trade unions deal with this. I think it's going to be a big deal over the next coming weeks.
a good deal of outrage on the timeline as well. Paul, what's your thoughts about this?
I think it's an absolutely disgraceful thing to say to someone that if you do not take a vaccine that you're going to lose your job. I think it's absolutely appalling. I'm shocked that, like, as Laura said, it's a completely different argument as to whether or not you should, as a member of society, take this jab. It is like, it's been the fastest rolled out jab you've ever seen, which is really, really good. And I do think the scientists around it are getting it generally right. However, I can totally understand why people might have their own personal concerns about that. I think that the fact that someone's going to say you are going to lose your job unless you do this thing, that's an absolute disgrace. They have failed to educate those people and convince them. Perhaps educate's not the right word. They've failed to convince those people that this is safe and necessary, and now they're going to say they're going to lose their jobs. These low-paid workers, these people from working class backgrounds from all over the world, as we know, people in care homes come from all over the world, and they've probably already had COVID, a lot of them themselves, because they put a lot of people into care homes who had COVID. We know what happened there. They may feel like they've already got a level of immunity anyway. And like, I think about someone like mine and Laura's brother-in-law who was really scared of vaccinations, really terrified. He took the vaccination, but it terrified him. And some people are terrified of needles and things. And you can't force people and say you're going to lose your job unless you choose to put something inside your body. That's absolutely disgraceful. I can't believe it's even like considered to be. Oh well, this is just an utter disgrace. Even though I believe people should be vaccinated, that's a choice, and it doesn't mean you can't work a job. And even though it's sensible to have the vaccine, in my opinion, I would never say that someone would not be allowed to work for not doing so. It's appalling.
But putting the other side of the case, this isn't just about whether you get the disease. It isn't just about protecting yourself. The people who work in care homes, and I absolutely take the hypocrisy of the government suddenly getting excited about how we need to protect the people who are in the care homes, the residents of the care homes. But nevertheless, the fact is that the people who work in care homes work with the people who are most vulnerable, who are, and let's face it, they've had the vaccine, but it's not 100% effective. And would you, if your parent was in a care home, would you not prefer to know that the people who were coming in and working with your parent were not as protected against bringing in the virus, carrying the virus, sharing the virus as is possible? And sort of is it not about almost the kind of the equivalent of a DBS, in as much as we're just trying to make sure, the government is just trying to make sure that the people who are working with care home residents are as safe as possible. Now, and surely that can't be a bad thing. And so I suppose the next question is that if your answer is sort of we can't force people, so we can't say it's a requirement, it's a criteria of your job that you have the vaccine, how else would you achieve that level of safety?
Well, you could start by stopping the virus coming into the country so regularly by shutting down travel corridors and things like that when they need to, and rather than if Boris Johnson wanted to go there, you actually could care about your people, but that is not what's happening. Look, what's going to happen after this? What's going to be next? You have to be vaccinated in order to do this job, in order to do the job that you're that you're already in, and you will lose your job if you don't do this. Or what about if they decide that it's incredibly important to put a tracker in you? And I know this is like almost like going down conspiracy theories and stuff like that, but there was talk about it. There is talk about microchipping people. It has been floated in right-wing circles that people should be microchipped for going through airports and things like that. These are really, really, really big questions. You shouldn't be forcing anyone to do anything with their body that they don't consent to. If the government have failed to convince people that it's safe, then that's on them. You know what I mean? That's on them. Do something. Convince people that it's a really good idea. Like, incentivize people. I don't know. I think if we saw this occurring in a different country, we would be absolutely horrified at the idea that you were going to force people to do anything at all, and you were going to remove people's livelihoods, low-paid people anyway. If you're going to remove those people's livelihoods, have they forced anyone else to do? Have they forced MPs to take it? Have they forced, who else are they going to force to do it? Is it just people in care homes? What is it about people in care homes? Why should they be the only ones to do this? Why shouldn't everyone in a school? Why shouldn't all teachers be vaccinated? All teachers have yet to be vaccinated. What about teenagers? That's where the spread's going on at the moment. So if you're really worried about the spread, why focus on these? This is kind of like, well, I don't care about the spread. I don't care about how much it spreads as long as those care home people are vaccinated. It gives them cover. It's political cover. Oh, well, we told them they had to get vaccinated. That's what it's for. It's not to stop the spread at all. This government acts in bad faith consistently. And I believe this is a bad faith act.
Omid, I'm reading the timeline there. There are a number of people who are concerned about the effect that it might have on the industry and on the workforce and on the industry itself. Do you see this as potentially something which will cause hundreds of people to resign their jobs, which will throw care homes into absolute chaos? What effects do you think it'll have?
It does have the potential to annoy a lot of staff, and quite rightly, they shouldn't be forced to do something if they don't want to. But from the other sort of perspective, is as care workers, they're also in a lot of ways administering minor medical treatments all the time to the people they look after. So surely they should understand the validity of everyone being vaccinated. So I would assume that are already, if they could have got the vaccine based, because obviously a lot of the vaccinations currently are taking place from the older members of the population down, and obviously I can imagine a lot of care workers could be, anything from close to retirement age themselves to middle age, so would already been within the age bracket to be vaccinated. So I'm personally very pro-vaccine. I think you just have to mention two words, and that's smallpox, to know that how brilliant vaccines are to protect people. So I disagree with forcing people to get the vaccine, but I'd also very much question why people would refuse a vaccine. That's the big concern for me.
Thank you. The timeline is in agreement with you that we're just not a society that likes going down the mandatory route, forcing people to do things route, even though we may think it would be a good thing. We don't like the idea of forcing them. Thank you very much for your comments, and thank you for your comments, Anthony Riley. We are living in worrying times, dystopian, authoritarian, and very Orwellian, to say the least. And it's a big problem. Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, we've moved on from I'm going to move on from the big question. Some music's going to play in absolutely inaudibly, and then Paul's going to give me a nod. Thank you. And we move on to our other questions. Three absolute corkers here. Because I spent so long talking to Omid at the beginning and welcoming him and quizzing him about his job at the CLP. We've now got a limited time for these absolute meaty questions. Omid, is this Met institutionally corrupt? Tell us how this came about and give us your take on it.
It's something I've only very recently become aware of in the last sort of couple of days, due to an independent inquiry into the killing of Daniel Morgan, and obviously the independent inquiry finding that institutional corruption, but it hasn't, obviously in the news article you just can't go into the kind of detail to sort of detail the evidence. I mean, I know from my own work as a forensic analyst that you need to go through reams and reams of evidence and come to a well-reasoned conclusion. But obviously, to go through that evidence takes weeks. So I would actually like to see some of the evidence to say that. But based on my own experience and based on my sort of what I've seen in the past of the way police have behaved in all kinds of situations, I can certainly see the Met not only being institutionally prejudiced, along with many other police forces have proved to be institutionally prejudiced. For example, Cleveland police were their police and crime commissioner resigned over the horrible racism within Cleveland police. So institutionally prejudiced is not really much of a stretch to go to corrupt, because if they're making prejudiced decisions, there could also seem to be corrupt decisions as well as not doing their job properly, basically. I mean, a couple of classic examples being, was it Stephen Lawrence? The family was monitored by police because they thought there was some kind of gang involvement in the killing, when it wasn't. It was just a horrific, straightforward, racist killing, basically. They just didn't like the boy because he was black, and it was, it's a horrible thing that things like that still happen today. Other examples being the recent sort of thing in Parliament with the Spy Cops bill, where the police are still allowed to use children as witnesses and leave them in vulnerable situations to gather intelligence for them. And this is considered to be acceptable police practice. I don't think it is myself. I think it's disgusting. So I think there's a lot of work that the police forces, or the police services, I should say, throughout the country should do to sort of clean up their act, frankly. Not just their everyday practice, but their attitude towards prejudice and corruption.
Thank you, Omid. I mean, Laura, I'd love to hear your take on this. I mean, I think most people would agree with Omid that there are far too many examples of the police being institutionally prejudiced. But I was interested in this word, institutionally corrupt, which struck me as being a very extreme and a different thing altogether. How have the Met come to be accused of being corrupt, which is a different thing to being prejudiced, I think.
Yeah. So essentially, it's been an ongoing investigation for the last 37 years since Daniel Morgan's death. Well, murder. He didn't just die. He was found with an axe in his head. That if that doesn't stand out in people's memories, I don't know what will. And he was a private detective at the time, and there were rumblings that he was about to release some information about corruption within the London police force on fraud and drugs. And then he was killed. So I recognise that it is a bit line of duty to like join the dots up and go, oh, it must be baddies, in the police force, but they've never found a killer or killers, and the family of Daniel Morgan have been begging the police to do more for 37 years and been begging for this investigation. They said they feel like they've been lied to, things have been brushed under the carpet. They believe that this case was solvable and the police have chosen not to. So essentially that's what kicked this off, and it's been going for all this time and it's now just being released. I think there's an argument here, isn't there, that the police force up and down the country look after their own, and they're taking a lead from the government, who look after their own. If you look at Sarah Everard's vigil, for example, a bunch of women coming to mourn, pay respects peacefully, and the police went in with such determination to stop that vigil. Was that a case of them protecting one of their own? And then not a few weeks later, they allowed people to gather for other protests and things, and nothing was done. So that I think there are questions to be answered here, and I think if it wasn't institutionally corrupt, they're not really going about it the right way to disprove that. And this, as I say, this investigation has come to the conclusion that it is. They're calling for the resignation of Cressida Dick, but Priti Patel has said that the Home Office and all of the government still afford her all of the confidence that they have, and they don't want to see her go anywhere. So yeah, it is all a bit cloak and dagger and a bit line of duty, but it's so important. These are the people who, rumor has it, are there to protect us. I am now of the mind that has never been the case. The more things that happen. I happen to know some wonderful police officers, by the way, don't get me wrong. I know some incredible police officers who literally are doing it for the good of people, but it doesn't seem to be the culture, or certainly the top level of policing, and certainly the Home Office as well. There seems to be a lot of questions to be asked still.
Paul, I think that what I find most amazing is, after this bombshell announcement, basically they all say, no, you're being very silly, and just ignore it. Almost proving the point in a way. How should the government have responded to this? What would you like to see happening now?
I don't think the government are going to respond to this in the way that we would expect normal humans to be, because the Met would also cover up for them. What they've been found guilty of is covering up for themselves, and we've seen this as a pattern with the way the government behave. They cover up for themselves, and I mentioned it during the talk about the vaccination. It's a cover, they're putting that vaccination in place and forcing people to do that as a cover for themselves. So why would they do anything at all? What they should be doing is they should be looking into these institutions and finding out what they're for. Are they for looking after themselves? Are they for looking after the government? Are they for so we saw the Sarah Everard protests. It wasn't a protest, actually. It was a vigil. And they went out there, and did they go out, now that we found out that they were institutionally corrupt, did they go out to protect one of their own who has admitted to raping and murdering a woman? Did they not really want the publicity around that? Did they go out and feel very, very negative about this? Now, we saw what Cressida Dick's reply was. She was interviewed, and she was saying, well, I'm very, very proud of the Met, and I'm very proud to be in the position. Yes, we've been found to be institutionally corrupt, but we're not. I'm very proud of it. And obviously we've let this family down massively, but I'm so very proud of all the work. And she was saying all these negative things about what she'd done. And then she said she was very, very proud. The other thing that was almost a bit chilling, and this is pure speculation, by the way, the assistant director, I can't remember what his name is, he was saying, it's a shame we've never found the killers in this case. Now, there's never been any mention that there was more than one killer. It says killer or killers. Everyone's always referring to killer or killers. And he mentioned it 3 times in an interview that, that there were killers. And it was almost as if he knew what had happened. And I think that's getting conspiratorial again. But there's something about this whole situation that doesn't sit right. So what we should be doing is looking into those institutions to find out what they do and what they're for. I don't think that will happen in any case. And actually, I saw something on, I was just saying that I saw something on Twitter yesterday where an Uber driver in London, an Uber Eats bike rider, was stopped and arrested, and he was put in the back of a van for 17 hours. Like, what you doing out? He's like, I'm just doing my job. I'm just going about it. And it was an absolutely appalling situation where they accused him of assaulting a police officer, which he clearly didn't, because they didn't charge him with it. and these
Paul,
things are
you've
happening all the
disappeared.
time.
Your sound isn't. Your sound is malfunctioning, Paul.
Is it? Seems to be
Yeah.
working. All right.
It's cutting in and out.
All right. That's
In and out.
that's possibly for that's. I think it's all right
Thank
for
you.
the
I'm
audience.
going to draw that to an end anyway. Thank you very much for your comments. A lot of comments on the really interesting comments on the timeline, worth reading, people. Mainly along the lines that who are the police here to defend, or what are the police here to do, and a suspicion that they're here to protect the establishment. Thank you very much for those comments, everybody. People on line apparently can hear you perfectly. It's just us here that can't hear you. And finally, the last question. Paul, is Matt Hancock totally hopeless?
Totally effing hopeless, apparently. That's what Boris Johnson has said in private text messages between him and Dominic Cummings, which Dominic Cummings has revealed. So they all think he's terrible. They all think he's absolutely hopeless. But actually, they all think that's what they think privately. But publicly, they were absolutely fine. They were actually going to replace him with Michael Gove, of all people. So if that's a good idea to replace him with Michael Gove, if Michael Gove's the answer, then, the question must be something absolutely terrifyingly appalling. So, yeah, I do think Matt Hancock is absolutely hopeless. Apparently, I agree with Boris Johnson on something, but, Boris Johnson doesn't agree with himself, apparently, because he's a serial liar, isn't he? He continuously lies and he'll just make anything up. So, yeah, that's where we are.
Laura, all this ties in much to a degree with the way the government has been handling the pandemic. Do you think that he's hopeless, or do you think, as people are suggesting on the timeline, that he might be intentionally doing the things that he's doing? That there's a kind of intention behind the incompetence.
I think there's an argument for both. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think I think what all the decisions they've made have been thought out, and they've chosen to do what they've done. And I think it's been tantamount to murder, for a lot of the things they've chosen to do. I do think he's hopeless. You see him in interviews, and you can't believe him. Oh, do you remember the cry? Do you remember the? Oh, it was so fake and awful. So yeah, he is hopeless as well at even doing something disastrous, which the government wanted him to do. He was hopeless at that and convincing people. I also think he's a very good size person to be thrown under a bus. And I think that is another thing that's happening to him now. Boris is very, very keen on blaming anybody but himself. I know I just don't trust anything they do. These are supposed to be leaked text messages and stuff. I don't know. I think it's all a game, and it's all on purpose, and it's petty and petulant and awful. And this shouldn't be what we're spending our time focusing on. We should be holding them to account for what they're doing, not worried about who said what in a text. But yeah, like Paul said, if that text was real, then sadly I agree with Boris Johnson on something, which is scary in itself.
Omid, is this a sign of something much bigger wrong at the heart of government, or is this? The media virtually ignored it. It's just been allowed to pass by without comment. Is this a sign of something important, or is this just a sort of silly men being nasty to each other?
I think unfortunately, it's just a classic example of how the whole current Tory cabinet I'd see them as bad as each other, to be honest. You just look at what happened with, was it Alistair Grayling or Failing Grayling or whatever you want to call him, ferry company with no ferries. And yet, obviously, he got the boot and then got another job later. I think what's probably going to happen is Matt Hancock will be thrown under the bus, and then a couple of months later given another job. I mean, just look at what happened to Priti Patel as well. She was having unauthorized negotiations with Israeli diplomats, and now she's Home Secretary.
I mean, my theory on this, which I've
I just think
stated
they're
in
all
the
as bad as
previous
each other,
show,
frankly.
is that these people are here precisely so Boris Johnson can blame them and doesn't take the blame himself.
Yeah, that sounds very plausible, and that seems to be what's happened. It's happened under the last two Tory prime ministers as well.
Do you think the timing of this is important? I mean, it's hard to believe that Cummings is doing it at the government's behest. But I mean, one or two people on the timeline have been pointing out that this has come at the time when actually the nation is very disappointed because we thought that the 21st was going to be Freedom Day, and it isn't. Do you think that this is all just a dead cat to distract us from the bigger issues?
Yeah, I think he's going to be thrown under the bus and given the blame for the whole pandemic, and then they're going to go, "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll fix this now," and everything's just going to go on as normal with the usual corruption, lying, all the rest of it.
Paul, last word, and then we'll finish the show. To tell you the truth, give us your judgment on how the government is doing with the pandemic at the moment. I mean, we seem to be not quite as quick as people would want, but we seem to be coming out of it. This seems to be almost like an Indian summer of a crisis as we move out of the pandemic. Do you think do you think that's the case, and that the government, that the people are just wanting to forgive and forget and move on now?
I think we've got almost apathy about it. Like, a lot of people care deeply about this, and then a lot of people are just like, I just want to get on with my life. While we had lockdown and things, I was hoping that we would have a period of reflection and think about what is important in life and what sort of things that we should be doing to support one another, to have a better life, because a lot of the stuff that people wanted to get back to, lots of others really, really desperately did not want to get back to. They wanted their lives to be better than they were before we went into lockdown. Now it's just been, the only thing they seem to have restricted is fun. You know what I mean? Like, they've like, well, we're all going to work. We've all been going to work for a very long time. We've all got to do like everything else. We've got to pay our bills, and people are really worried. And those people who can't go to work are really, really worried about that. And you're just desperate to get back so they can earn some money. And the only thing, like, I did a survey on this for YouGov. It was one of those text message surveys. And they were like saying, well, you know, are you going to be able to adjust back to life the way it was? I was like, well, it's going to be very easy to adjust from this to that, because the only thing I'm going to be able to do additionally is have fun and go somewhere and maybe, like, you know, go and see a gig, or, you know, or like go and see a sporting event or something like that. That's the only thing that we're restricted from doing. Now, Royal Ascot was on. They weren't restricted from doing that, but sports days have been cancelled. So, like, kids have got to go to school and they've got to be in these, like, really sterile conditions, but they're not allowed a sports day outside, but Royal Ascot's on. You know what I mean? Like, everything that they could have done shows complete contempt for people. And the fact that we're not absolutely furious, all of us, like, whether you think you're left wing, right wing, whether you think you're in the centre, everyone should be absolutely furious at this government and the way they've behaved, and the way they've just, you know, restricted fun, they've restricted enjoyment. They haven't had their fun restricted and their enjoyment restricted, and they've expected us just to get on with it and keep the wheels oiled and keep on going. And then they're going to make the people who actually help the most pay for it by having a real terms pay cut. That should be infuriating for absolutely everyone. And sadly, I think the apathy is meant, it's not, people are just like, oh, please, can I just get back to work? Can I just do this? Can I just do that? And then they will be grateful, even though they keep changing the date. And I have no confidence that, the next date will be met either, because we can see the pandemic is coming back for another wave. So, sorry, I couldn't be more hopeful on that one, but they're an absolute disaster.
Well, we wait to see. Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. First of all, some of these comments, I'm trying to listen and read them. I don't multitask very well, but some of your comments are just phenomenal. We must, Laura, have Kat Cray on the show sometime. It's sort of some of the things that she says makes your hair stand on end. It's just
she's awesome.
So that's fun. And Jane Strange, just really brilliant comment. That isn't to say that everybody's comments aren't interesting, but you just think, wow, that is mind changing.
Ruth's comment about the Met there was really
I
interesting.
was going to ignore that. I thought that would get us all arrested.
No, that's brilliant, that one. Well, it's publicly available information that they had 265 complaints of improper conduct per 1,000 staff members. 265 per 1,000 staff members. They sit about in the middle of the table in comparison to other forces in the country. So if the Met are institutionally corrupt, and they're in the middle of all the police forces, if that's the baseline, could you imagine the ones above? What are they doing? Why are they, if they're bad, then what about the others that appear to be worse?
Yeah, she said Lincolnshire and Gloucestershire are over 450 complaints per 1,000, so they're higher than the Met.
To be fair to the police, and you said you have police friends, and I have police friends and family, and they are really vulnerable to accusation. And one of the ways that people react to being arrested is to shove in a complaint about the way they were arrested. So that's part of the reason those figures run so high. Cat Crazy's happy to chew the fat. Get in touch with Laura. Laura will sort that out. We'll have to have you on the show. Right. I'll stop. Stuart was here watching us, or has he just tuned in after the football?
No, you say from the beginning.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you to the team. When there's not 4, when there's just 3, it's so much more of a burden on people to actually contribute and come up with ideas to keep the same pace of the show going. Omid, you've been absolutely brilliant. Don't go away, because what happens now is that we take a 5-minute break to listen to No Pass Around, and then we come back. Laura, are you going to run the, or is it Paul? Who's going to run?
I don't have the ability to scroll back. I've tried to note a few, but I think maybe we do it jointly.
Right, it's the dailies, because I don't have the ability to scroll back either. The dailies are going to take us through some of your comments, but by far the best bit of that show comes when you throw questions at us and say, what do you think about this, and what do you think about this? And particularly we love it when you say, I think this, what do you think? And so you make your comments, and it becomes much more interactive, and you become part of the show with us, and that's what we love it when it happens well.
Interesting. So just there, Ruth Davidson saying that it's actually complaints upheld by the Independent Officer of Police Conduct.
That's terrifying.
That's a shocking level.
That is really scary. And that's not the worst force. Oh my goodness, maybe we're very lucky in done. So we'll see you in 5 minutes, and we'll see just how many indiscreet comments I can make before the end of the second half of the show. So stand there with your record buttons, people, to see things that I shouldn't say that I managed to say. So see you in 5 minutes. If you're going, goodbye. Thank you. Thanks to Paul, Laura, and Omid for the first half. See you for the second half. Bye-bye.
My name is Jack Atkins, and I'm not afraid. And I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist, a dead one, they say, and a rhyme, a real we are. when I first left all them months ago. I told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. For an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure. Panorama here we are. There'll be no passerand, no passerand, no passerand today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no passerand here today. I told my mother, now mother be strong, for the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone, for I'm here we are. There'll be no passerand, no passerand, no passerand today. The fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no passerand here today. Cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past us first. And around here we are. There'll be no passerand, no passerand, no passerand today. The fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no passerand here, no passerand, no passerand, no passerand today. No passerand, no passerand, no passerand today. No passerand, no passerand, no passerand today. The fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no passerand here today.
Hello again, everyone. And very nice to see you all for the second half of the show. Get your comments in as we come in. We'll deal with them one at a time, I think. Jackie Nash is saying, why don't the nasty corrupt policemen get caught and jailed? Oh. You can do in a second, but we're having sound issues again. So yeah, I'm gonna have to do something with the sound again. So the sound that I fixed for you has not fixed for this. So I've got to go back to this. Right. That's
PC lead.
it's all here. It's all here, but I've fixed it now. It should be fine. Yeah. Okay. So you can speak now, and you should be able to be heard.
I was just saying that before we start talking about the thing that you were introducing, I just wanted to draw attention to the comments saying how brilliant Omid was, and how I did it. It's particularly difficult when there's only three of you, and you were brilliant. Thanks so very much. Right, Paul, back to you and your point.
Yeah. So a couple of things. So Neil Terry saying, have you ever heard of a case of PC Lee Birch from Wiltshire? He was caught on camera in court abusing a prisoner and no action was taken against him at all, despite the judge being horrified. Now, I haven't heard about that case.
No, neither.
No, deeply worrying though. And Kat and Vonnie seem to be having a conversation. And what Kat, this is a really interesting one that Kat's saying. What do you think trade unions need to be doing as we approach the return to a kind of normality, but in the face of rising COVID cases? I think that's a huge point to be making as well, because if the cases are going up, and there's this march towards whatever normality is, and there's going to be an opening up, it seems to be a little bit illogical, doesn't it? And what should trade unions be thinking about that? I know, Laura, you're a trade union representative, aren't you? How do you feel as a trade union rep about that?
Well, I think we've got to take into account people's human rights, really, and also being in a position where you are put under an ultimatum from your employer is not really conducive to a good working environment, is it? I think there are perhaps ways and means to, I wouldn't say educate, but encourage people rather than say or else. I don't think that's going to go down very well with anybody.
Amazed. What do you think, trade union wise?
I think whatever they decide to do, it's going to be difficult because of the new legislation that hampers the work trade unions can do, specifically with how much of a majority they need to actually initiate strike action if something goes, really bad with the negotiations and they have to sort of take further actions. I would hope that trade unions can negotiate sufficient protective equipment for people who are on the front lines and dealing with the general public. But as we've seen, that's been a problem even for NHS staff during this whole pandemic. So I'm quite worried.
I'd like to bring in a comment that I saw earlier on that feeds from this. I think that if we're going to force staff to do something that maybe some staff don't want to do, then we're leaving people the option to do things that are quite dangerous. And Ruth had said there's people already selling full COVID jab cards. They go and get the jab on behalf of somebody else and charge them money for it. I mean, that's scary, and we definitely shouldn't be in a position where we're forcing people down that route. I can't actually believe that's the thing. Like people are charging like £100. I mean, not only is that dangerous for the person who didn't get the jab and they're telling everybody that did, but how dangerous is that for the people who are going just to get them and saying, I'll do that, stick more in, it's fine, for money? Really, really worrying.
Another worrying thing, and it links back in with what Hamid was saying about the trade union laws, is trade unions aren't allowed to ballot online. They won't allow this to happen. The government won't allow it to happen, which, the trade unions are convinced that if they could have an online ballot, the take-up will be a lot higher on voting for
You'd have
things.
almost universal uptake, really, if they could just do a couple of clicks on their phone and an email vote.
Yeah,
on a particular issue.
exactly, and it can be done because we've done it for Labour Party elections and what have you, and there are ways of doing that securely. But the worrying thing as well is they want to move away from this online thing because it does increase participation. And I asked about doing blended meetings for the parish council. It's illegal to do a blended meeting. It's illegal for us to have people who can't make it. So if they've got a childcare issue, or if they they can't make it for whatever, or if they're isolating with COVID, they are not allowed to vote remotely anymore. And the government really want this to be the case where you have to be there in order to vote, because there's a lot more control for that, isn't there? If there's not a remote voting option, then that does control certain things. It does keep things very much with the establishment. It does disenfranchise people who couldn't necessarily make the meetings. John, I know that you've obviously been doing this for a long time. I'll bring you in a second, mate. John, you've been doing this for a long time. What do you think about being able to vote, and is there a problem with people doing a blended meeting where you could do part of it online, part of it in person?
It's I find it my answer to that question is I find it absolutely flabbergasting that the government is not allowing online meetings, wholly online meetings. There's so I think the point we've made on this show many times is that it actually increases participation. It enables participation by a whole swathe of people who can't get out and get to meetings. And and if you had a situation where all those people who have to stay in with families and therefore can't get to evening council meetings could actually participate in council meetings, that would see an absolute increase in democracy. The number of people who actually are saying for our group meetings, our town council Labour group meetings, they're saying we want to carry on meeting online because we don't have to leave the house. It's not a whole evening lost. You just turn up, you take part in your meeting, it lasts an hour, and then you can get on with your home life again. It's an enabling thing. And so many things in terms of voting. I cannot understand a situation where you can register to vote online, but then they don't trust you to vote online. It's an absolute hypocrisy. And I think you're absolutely right, Paul, that it's quite simply a situation that the government is going to make it as difficult as possible for people to participate in our democracy, because then that means that the kind of privileged, older, retired, more wealthy people are the ones who are able to participate and therefore able to run the show. So all the things that you said are absolutely correct. And it is a conspiracy. It is intentional and it's disgraceful. I want to talk about the trade unions and what they can do, though. And they've been just sort of last night. I sent some of my books to Music Magpie, is it called? What a rip-off that is. I'm never doing it again. But sort of the Hermes lady turned up at 8:15. She still had 48 people to see that day. 48. And of course, the rules are that she has to knock off at 9. And sort of, she was wonderful and helpful because something went wrong with the beeper, and she was just so lovely, and I felt so for her with just a night stretching out in front of her. And then the other one, we went to get some fish and chips for the first time since February 2020. We went out for some fish and chips and ate in with the Dixons. You know the Dixons, our friends, in a restaurant. And the waitress was just so lovely and came over and helped. We loved our fish and chips. And we said, are you very busy? She said, we are very busy at the moment. We haven't had a chance to have any lunch ourselves. We're missing our lunch. And it just strikes me that there's a whole class of people who have stepped up and gone the extra mile and are now expected to go the extra mile as part of their work. And they've been taken advantage of. There's been no remuneration in terms of extra pay for the extra work that they've done. And the employer is going to want to keep that level of input. And they're the ones who've kept the country running. And now they're going to be exploited. And the last thing I've got to say is the worst thing about all that is that those are the very people who generally are not unionized. And it's just a massive failure of our society that, in fact, there's a whole swathe of workers who haven't even got the protection of trade unions. And we know that we've got a government who has been steadily drawing the teeth of the trade union movement anyway. But now we have all these ununionized people who are just being taken advantage of. And I'm very, very worried. Because, as my wife says all the time, they want to drive us down to the way that you work in the sweatshops of the Far East, if I may be allowed to say so. That's what they're driving down, and they're saving money, not by mechanization, but by simply leaning on their workforce more and more and more. And we need to be very, very afraid.
Yeah. Hamid?
Can I just add on to that? Oh, sorry, Yumi, did you want to
Oh,
come
no,
in? I'll
fine,
wait.
go ahead.
I just wanted to say somebody, I don't know if it was Neil, someone in the comments, it could have been Neil, it could have been Kat, and it could have been Vonnie, who are massive trade unionists and activists, who said that it's really, really important that we educate people on the importance of trade unions and the history of trade unions, because there's so many workers now who use it as an insurance system. I'll pay into this in case anything happens. Actually, it's much more than that. Trade unions do so much more, and they're so necessary, and it's about understanding why they're necessary, especially with a lot of young workers now, with the gig economy and everything. A lot of young workers like, do you know what, I don't want to lose that bit of money. That's like, you know, some unions charge like £17-18 a month. For somebody very young on really low wages, that's a lot of money. I mean, most unions do a tiered system, so it's cheaper the less you get paid, but a lot of our young people just wouldn't even think to join a union, because why would you do that? I think the importance is getting that education in. At what point you do that, I don't know. I think getting employers to buy into some sort of induction where there's a trade union there to tell you about it would be difficult in many instances. And then you've got the education system who basically are not going to let you do it because you're not allowed to do anything that might oppose capitalism at any point. And I think there might be an overlap there with trade unionism. So it's finding ways to get that message out as effectively as possible. I think it's really important.
Chat's very, very busy. Hamid, you had a point before. Do you still want to come in on that?
It was just about the idea of remote voting. I mean, obviously we can vote by post for a government, so you know we can vote them in remotely, but we can't really do much. We have fewer options to vote in our trade union remotely.
Yeah.
So it's just, really.
Love what Mark Lungley says so often, but this one is so important. We also need to be talking about the next steps after you've joined a union. What next? Branch meetings, etc., like that sort of. That's just the same with the Labour Party, Mark. Okay, you've joined. Now what? Now what are you going to do? Where are you going to go from there? Yeah. Sorry, Paul.
No, I'm just going to bring in some comments. Kat's talking about like a lot of things. She was talking about educating, and I think the key thing is, I know that when Kat's talking about education in the truest sense, where it's a two-way thing, where you learn about one another and you learn about one another's positions, rather than, I think a lot of people say, oh, well, the important thing about education is just tell people things. You just tell people things. That's not education as far as we're concerned. So whenever I use the term education, I mean a two-way communication street where you learn from one another, rather than just telling people stuff, because that's not education, is it? That's just telling people stuff. But yeah, she's made a load of point about that. And also she said about like it's really vital that senior positions in unions are elected, which is absolutely essential. I think we'll all agree with that one. Anne mentioned something earlier on as well. She said that that it's not democracy. What did she said? They want to. It was something like similar to they want the illusion of democracy, but it's not really democratic at all. Chris Hood's mentioned that they live broadcast their parish council meetings and take questions in that way. Yeah, my point was you're not allowed to vote, but yeah, that's a really good model. So that sounds a really good thing. There was a question from I think it was Ruth. She wants to know what we think of the notion that white privilege supposedly hampers white working class students. Now, this is something that's come out today, isn't it? They've done this report where apparently teachers are such bad people that they are somehow discriminating against white working class people, although they don't have a category for black working class and they don't have a category for any other working class group. So they're picking the group of people who are going to underachieve, putting the word white in front of it rather than looking at it as a whole class thing and saying actually it's working class people. It's not their ethnicity that's necessarily the case. Also, Gypsy Roma traveller people are included in that, and they haven't included them as a separate category. And they are actually the people who have the poorest educational outcomes. And it's almost like, well, it must be bad teaching, because it can't be the fact that like people are having money taken away from them, and and they're having to visit food banks and they're not getting free school meals and all these awful things, educational maintenance allowance taken away from them. All these things that they've done over the past 10 years apparently have nothing to do with the outcomes of these people. Apparently it's just bad teachers, making sure that for some reason bad teachers seem to appear to want to have bad outcomes for only white working class people. The rest of the working class people, fine. And it's just appalling. I'm going to bring in a maid here.
Yeah, that's not the case. What you see is really everyone at a working class level is going to suffer from the kind like social deprivation that's going to affect their learning because of the kind of resources they have at home to support their homework. Then there's also the whole in-work poverty where both parents are working, but they're still struggling to cope financially. So the parents don't have much time to help the children with their learning. And then obviously once you've got the working class issues sorted, then there's that additional tier of those working class people who are from ethnic minority backgrounds. They're more likely to be discriminated against, and the women also who are more likely to be discriminated against at job interviews. So there's going to be less opportunities for them. And for people who are obviously, from all kinds of backgrounds that people will discriminate against, LGBT, disabilities, all kinds of things for all kinds of reasons. For example, I've been to interviews. I suppose I took you back on the institutional corruption of the police. Really, I've been to interviews with the police where they've actually openly asked me as part of the getting to know you questions in the interview before the interview starts, where's your name from? And it's just like, well, if you know that information, then you know in detail my ethnic background and can therefore discriminate against me and make the interview questions harder. So, it's a horrible situation, full stop. Whether you're working class, whether you're from a different ethnic background, whether you're gay or whether you're disabled or any other kind of thing that people could consider or people who have prejudiced views would not like, basically.
I think one of the things to understand about like any form of discrimination like that as well is that no one is ever saying that people aren't discriminated against if they are white. It's like when people talk about white privilege, they're not saying that white people do not face discrimination. They absolutely do in many, many ways. It's extremely rare for people to face discrimination because of them having white skin. That's what people are making, but it doesn't mean that everyone's got a wonderful life, does it? It's like, and I think that's what the lie that people try to put out there. John,
I'm at a loss here because I'm unaware of the report. I think there's a difference between this at an individual level and at a general level. And there is just no doubt that any child from any background can suffer a situation which harms and damages their educational achievement. And sort of you get some of the most privileged children from the wealthiest white backgrounds, sort of going to a school and being picked on, bullied, and their lives ruined and their education damaged. It can happen at an individual level to anybody at any time. And just sort of there are situations where coming from a posh white background can in fact play against you. So when I first came to teach in County Durham, I found a great deal of personal hostility because I'd gone to university and got a PGCE. I hadn't gone to teach training college, and and there was hostility to me for that reason, both in the staff room and in the job market. So there's all kinds of inverse discriminations and things going on at an individual level. I think the thing we need to keep reminding people of, and Omid hit the nail on the head, that when you haven't got enough to eat, when you haven't got a situation in the home which enables you to go away and get on with your homework, when you are worried about whether your family is going to be in the same home tomorrow, when you're suffering all the things that poor children suffer, that is a massive downer on their educational ability, and it ruins their lives. And so we have an entire underclass, and that is clearly and demonstrably worse for certain sections of that underclass, and sort of the GRT community and the black community are clearly sort of caught in a trap, and you have to be a remarkable human being to be able to claw your way out of that situation. And that situation requires input at an institutional level to overcome it at a societal level as well. And it is absolutely correct that we should do so. And sort of individual people sort of say, well, it was very difficult for me, miss the point. We're not talking about individuals. Any individual can go through a difficult patch. We're talking about the genuine institutional setup of these systems is wrong in our society at a basic level. And that's why I became a Labour councillor, to try and do something about it. And that's why I'm so pleased to see people like me, Paul, carrying on in that. That's how I feel, Paul.
Laura, do you know much about this? Have you seen this report today?
Well, it's funny because it's not funny. It's far from funny. But I saw this. I was working because I'm working from home, and I had the telly on mute. And you know when it comes across the bottom about the headlines, and I saw white pupils, white poor pupils, and I was like, I just couldn't get my head around what point they were trying to make. Was it because they were white? Was it because they were poor? Was it both? And I was just like, if that had said black poor pupils, then I would have felt like they were trying to make, it was the BBC, so obviously it wasn't, but I would have felt maybe they were trying to make a point about racism in the UK, about poverty in the UK, how those two things intersect, and it would have been dead clever. But putting white there, I was like, what's the relevance of the whiteness? I couldn't get my head around it. By the time I'd put it on, the story had finished. And I think essentially, I actually feel like there's something darker at play here. And I think the government are using this to compound racism in our society, to try and stir that up a bit more. Oh, well, I'm white. Are you telling me that because I'm white that I don't get enough of a good education? Oh, this country's going to dogs and it's all their fault, and point the finger at other people. And I worry that story is going to start to reignite those arguments again, when really you can get rid of the white part and go poor. It's a class struggle. The reason white poor people are having a hard time is because they are poor people in this country. They don't have the same opportunity. We living in this, somebody put in the comments, it's an underclass essentially, where we don't get the things we should have. And if we had all of those things, then it wouldn't matter what color you are. Do you know? I was just like, I feel like this is a planned article. This is a planned news piece, and I worry what's coming next with it.
Yeah, you are so right, by the way. That is absolutely correct. It is just a kind of an almost a dead cat argument. The idea of white privilege is a dead cat argument to just try and get us all fighting amongst ourselves. Vonnie Hardman, by the way, is on fire tonight on the comments. Absolutely agree with you, Laura. Sorry, did I interrupt you? I mean,
no, it was me, but it's okay. Hello from North Norway. Yes, hello, Polar Knights. Great. Norway wasn't on our list of podcast listeners, so you can always catch it on the podcast too and give us an extra country. But so really, really nice to have you here. So what I was going to say was this comes from a backlash. I think this is a backlash against the Labour government when they were empowering education. What they wanted to do is they wanted to look to see if there was any problems with with any discrimination going on, and they did find that that black boys were doing worse, the worse outcomes, and there was many different reasons for that. And they talked a lot about aspiration. I actually think people have got enough aspiration, they just don't have enough opportunity. But anyway, regardless of that, I think people had a lot of problem with that. Michael Gove had this big push for white working class boys because they couldn't find that white people underperformed or anything like that, so they decided they would create a new category called white working class. But if you did any working class, they would have all underperformed in comparison to other people, because working class people's outcomes are worse than a lot of other people's, even though their ability is and they've done tests on this, exactly the same, they're on the same normal distribution. He also pushed for Summerborn because he was Summerborn, and he thought that being Summerborn was a big disadvantage. If you're born in the summer, you need to have special outcomes and what have you, which I could kind of see the argument. If you're nearly a year younger than some people in your class when you take your exams, that is an actual thing. There's a bit of a leveler out, but that disappeared. But the white working class boys stayed, and a lot of people relate to that as if the Conservative government care about those people. Just because they're mentioning the fact that people are doing worse doesn't mean they're doing anything about it or helping, and they've only blamed teachers for it. It's like it's awful. It's a real manipulation that they're doing. So I like that. The perfect evolution of beards, because Laura's beard is just coming in, and
next time I come on, I promise to have a different beard. I'll try and go to.
I like that. I like the lightheartedness of this section.
Great
as well,
socialist tradition, beards.
That's it. Mine's gonna have to be tidied up soon at some point, but yeah.
I'm too lazy to shave. That's my problem.
Yeah, I don't like it. I'm not a fan. Also, when I started being a teacher, I looked about 8, so beard. Yeah.
That's true. When I started, the story I always tell why I grew a beard was that I was doing my teaching practice and I got sent to the back of the dinner queue. By one of the dinner nanny. She did as a sixth former, and she sent me to the back of the dinner because I needed another teacher to step in and say. And after that, I thought, right, I'm going to prove that I can grow a beard. It came and never gone away.
Oh, look, someone's speaking Norwegian.
Oh no, that's not fair.
That's
good
brilliant.
effort, Neil.
That's brilliant. So are there
Kat
any other?
Kay is saying she's going to have to work on growing one. Don't worry, Kat. All you need to do is to wait another 25 years, and you'll be absolutely fine with it.
Something to look forward
I'm
to.
not shaving.
Some good news,
Responsibility.
though. I do have some good news. Kat has said she will quite happily come on Political Unmuted next week if you want.
Oh God! And I've just said that. No.
she's gonna message me now and go, "No, I've changed my mind."
That's great news, Kat. That's absolutely wonderful. And we'll look so much forward to seeing you on the show. Great news. Thank you.
Oh, and
So what did hell till Norge happen?
What Neil was saying is hello to North Norway, hope all is well there, and love and solidarity from Yorkshire, which is
nice.
Some people are so clever.
Yeah, that's all good. Are there any other comments we want to do? I think we should start the wind up, because I'm starting to flag, to be honest. My little eye. I'm not seeing circles.
Did we win the football? I got the impression that we'd won the football.
They were through anyway. England were through anyway, and I believe Scotland isn't. So commiserations with an iron brew.
Scotland.
Yeah.
He played so well against us as well. Absolutely nullified us. So there you go.
Yeah. Shame.
And we must, if we are fading out, we must say thank you to Omid. You will come on again, won't you, Omid?
Yeah, of course.
Has it been a positive experience for you?
Yeah, I think I was very, very nervous, but I think the drink helped me relax. So I think I'll definitely come back.
The aims of the show is that our guests leave thinking that they've given a good account of themselves and they were truthful to themselves, and that they're proud of their performance. That's one of our aims when we get guests on the show. And sort of, if that's not the case with you, well, it's a wrong feeling you've got, because you've been brilliant. Thank you so much. You must come on again. We need to sort of get your expertise.
Yeah, anytime you want me to come on, just drop me a message. It's all good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that we're building the team. See, we get to have more nights off now when we build our team.
That's right, because I'm filling in for Stuart, so I can watch the football.
Just one comment that I really like here. Paul Smith's quoted Norman Finkelstein here saying, "Identity politics is an insurance policy for the ruling class." And I always think that is the case. Like, they absolutely go on about how the left love identity politics, but actually they're the ones who are obsessed with identity politics. We just don't want to see people discriminated against. We want to see a level playing field where everyone's treated the same, whereas they want to make everything about identity. And I think a lot of liberals really fall into this as well, where they're like cancelling people. You don't change people's minds by cancelling people. You don't take, like, there's certain people who need a punch in the face, like Nazis, for example. But apart from fascists and people
I want to point out that I didn't say that for the first time. I didn't say that.
I don't think that it should just be totally uncontroversial to want to punch a Nazi in the face. Like that should be the least controversial thing going. But apart from those people, we should be talking to people, because if you can't change people's minds, then what's the point in being anti-racist if you think people are fixed forever? What's the point in being pro-LGBT plus if you think people who aren't will not eventually change their mind? If you move things forward and you help, and that's why that's why I think liberals, when they cancel people, get things very, very wrong.
I love Vonnie Hardman's when the powerless unite against the powerful, then we will win. It was a brilliant advert. Was it a Unite advert along those lines? But the one that's always moved me is the Bible quote, a bruised reed he will not break. The same kind of feeling. That's what we're here for. We're here to stand with the vulnerable, with the powerless, against the powerful. That's what for me, is at the heart of socialism. And well done, Vommy. I said you're on that.
And Kat's mentioned as well that she's like sometimes accused of identity politics when she's raising real issues. And I think that's what it is. It's like when you're trying to bring people to a certain level so people aren't discriminated against, and then they just go, oh, that's just identity politics. The right invented identity politics to do just that. That's what the Finkelstein comment was as well. Anne saying she hates the use of that word. She means Nazis. When I say Nazis, I mean a real Nazi. I'm not talking about people like Nigel Farage. I'm talking about genuine Nazis who actually believe in Nazi ideology. We're saying Nazi a lot tonight, aren't I? So yes, Anne. So if you think it's a disrespectful comparison, I'm actually comparing people who would actually say that they are Nazis or fascists of any type, whether that's people who like Mussolini or whether, you know, all those people. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So any closing comments, people? Anyone want to comment on anything there after my weird little rant there? Okay, so
I think so. There've been just so many comments tonight. We haven't been able to keep up. Sorry, we missed loads.
Just, for me, I go back to what I said right at the beginning of the show, that it's that comment line which just makes this show spectacular. I mean, you're wonderful. You know, I think you're wonderful, but that is spectacular. Spectacular.
Yeah, that's it. And we always have, like, we not only is it the people on the panel, but we have guests on the show. I feel like all our viewers are guests on the show as well, and they really do they just add a massive amount of richness. So people who listen on the podcast, you're very welcome as well, but you can always go online and see what the comments are, and you know that'd be nice. But you know, I don't want to leave out our podcast listeners, given that we've just hit 10,000 tonight. 10,000 ever podcast listens, which is pretty good. That just the audio podcast, that doesn't count all the viewing stuff. So we're quite pleased about that. 10,000, that's quite a milestone. So, and Jackie Nash says it's her favourite night of the week. That's really lovely.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you. You'll have to come on, Jackie, as well.
Anytime, just message us.
I am going to try and experiment. So if you're a Socialist Think Tank member, which people can become, we do have a Discord where people can... Neil, the podcast's exactly the same as the shows that we put out. There are a few that are on podcast only, which are the political education project stuff. But yeah, it's just the same as these shows, but it goes out as an audio. So if you ever miss it and you're in the car or something driving, then you can always catch up there. But yeah, I've kind of forgotten what I was going to say. Oh, if you remember, what we might be doing is we might be giving people the opportunity to come on and speak to us during the Discord or in this section. If you join our Discord, we could open up the audio channels, the voice channels, and then you could come on and ask a question with just your voice in this part and have a chat with us. So that might be like a little bit like a radio phone in. Might be fun. Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was plugging Socialist Think Tank. But if you want to become a member, you can. It is free to join, but we do appreciate a donation as well. It keeps us going. It keeps the channel going. It helps us to grow. So that's really positive. If you would do us a massive favour and make sure that you subscribe. I'll press the little button there. Subscribe to YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe. And tell other people too as well. That really, really helps. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and follow us on Instagram as well. All those things, and join our Discord and become a member. And we'll try and set the world to rights. And I think we will start to do some real think tank stuff, maybe over the summer, where we start to look at policy platforms and things like that as well. But we've got a lot to do over the summer. But yeah, that's it. So closing comments. I'll go John, and I'll go Mead, and I'll go Laura, and then we'll sign off and say bye-bye. John.
Bye-bye. God bless you. Thank you. Great show tonight. Well done, people.
Mead.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a really good experience, actually. So, and it's been great to see actually that you've had quite an international reach. Stacey had something similar once with Adam's Education, where she had someone tune in from Thailand to hear a bedtime story, which I thought was quite nice.
Oh,
So it's there's the Zoom meetings and the video meetings in general connecting people all over the world, and it's great. So good night, everyone.
That is lovely. And Laura?
yeah, just thank you, everybody who takes the time out to sit and watch, and everybody who contributes and gets involved. It really means the world, and we really love you being involved. The show would be absolutely pointless without you, so thank you. And Paula Knight, thank you. I will try and keep smiling.
And also thank you to those people who've commented. Thank you in particular to our moderators as well, who do a lovely job for us and keep things going and share the stream, which helps everyone grow as well. It is really, really appreciated. So I hope you all have a lovely rest of your night, and we will say our little goodbyes in the chat afterwards, Amid, so don't quite go anywhere yet, but we will see you all next week. Okay, see you there. Oh, and Saturday as well. And what's on Saturday, Laura?
Dan Lewis from Bywire is coming on Saturday, and we also have a Social Ties from the Rickard sisters, who developed a graphic novel version of The Ragged Trousered Philanthropist. It's a really good interview, so make sure you hang around for that on Saturday at 8 o'clock.
And for those of you who are going to the demo in London on Saturday, really do have a good time. Well, you know, I like a good protest, so that's why I'm saying have a good time. But Mark's mentioning see you there. Hopefully there'll be some people there. We haven't been able to get our train tickets down and our babysitters and stuff yet, so maybe we'll try and do something last minute. But anyway, have a lovely, lovely time, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Keep the red flag flying here.